breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
Welcome back to this episode of Brainstorming. Today we are going to talk about a condition that affects millions of people each year, which is anxiety and depression. Lots of people, even you, might suffer from symptoms of anxiety and depression, things like restlessness, racing thoughts, fatigue, all these things. So we're going to break this down a little bit for you. And I'm going to share my own personal story and my struggles with depression in my early 20s with you guys. So without further ado, let's get this thing rolling. How about yourself, man? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dr. Kolby. So yeah, this is a big topic and I'm excited about it. But really what I really want us to do is try to create some clarity. I know I've dealt with some serious depression and it's a dark place. But people have to know that there is a reason for it. And if there's a reason, that means there's a solution or solutions, and there's ways to get out of this, and you're not alone. So that's what I'm excited to talk about and what to do today.
Yeah. So first off, I think what we'd like to talk about with the depression part is like depression is like we talked about, super, super common. We pulled statistics earlier today, and it's around 8% of people over the age of 26 suffer from depression in some form. And then it actually increases when you look at anxiety to like 18% of people suffer from some form of anxiety. So it's really, really common. If you're suffering from it, we're going to go through some of the things that maybe you can look at as far as diet, health, some lifestyle choices that maybe you're making that are affecting your health negatively. And we're going to go a little bit in depth. And
So Dr. Kolby, you kind of gave us a little bit of a teaser there about your story. Would you be willing to share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about the prevalence of depression, it affected even myself in my early 20s. I went through a really stressful time in my life where I'd lost my grandfather, my long-term significant other we parted ways. And then my parents actually got divorced. And then what I thought was maybe my future going forward with like the family business and stuff like that suddenly fell apart, and I didn't have any direction anymore. Everything that was really familiar in my life was gone. Everything that I had perceived as being maybe a little bit more long-term as far as like a career choice and actually someone who I thought that maybe I had a future with, and my significant other was all of a sudden gone. And one of my best friends when my grandfather had passed away. So I suddenly started suffering from like a lot of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping. I was making poor health choices because I was totally stressed out. Trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. My diet was terrible. My digestion was terrible. So naturally, what do? I went to the doctor and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. I'm not sleeping. I'm losing weight. I'm sweating all the time. I'm super anxious. I'm failing. Like I'm not thriving in my classes in college like I normally do. What's the deal? And they're like, all right, well, we think you're depressed. What's going on with you? I'm like, all right, this and this and this and this. Yeah, definitely you're depressed. So they put me on an antidepressant medication. They put me on an SSRI, and I was on that for about 6 weeks. And while it kind of helped mask the symptoms a little bit, I knew that it wasn't going to be a long-term solution for me because I still was feeling really, really similar to the ways I was before. And while it was less, I was still having that. And actually, I kind of got fortunate because I grew up in a family that didn't use a lot of prescription medications. I was like, whatever, I'm going to get off of it. I'm going to, hit the books. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with me. I changed a lot of my diet. I started exercising more. I was eating more healthy. I was going to sleep earlier. I was trying to establish those healthy habits that maybe I was using before all the stress came on. And then I went to and got help as far as like managing my stress level. And I was able to pull myself out of that depression and actually wean off those antidepressant medications. But from a personal experience, it's super, super common, super easy to fall into that. And unless you get really fortunate like I did in my early 20s and I kind of found the right information at the right time and was able to put it all together and had people surrounding me that were able to help me, it's really easy to get stuck into this cyclical, this pattern of depression. So we're going to go through a little bit about maybe some diet, lifestyle, some pharmacological or pharmaceutical interventions, and then some other strategies that maybe you can use if you are an individual who suffers from depression like I was.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Dr. Kolby. That's a life-changing experience, I can imagine.
Yeah, it definitely is, right? So
Yeah.
I'm definitely, I appreciate things a lot more now, I guess, because I went through all of that. And I guess now that my patients that come through that do suffer from depression, I'm able to empathize a lot more with them because I've been in a very similar situation, maybe not the same, but similar as they are in.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to get tangled up too much into the weeds and the causes of depression. Of course, those social, emotional experiences that you had that will flip our physiology and get us get us to a state where our lifestyles don't follow a healthy lifestyle. So they start stumbling, we start tumbling, and everything snowballs, getting to a much worse state. But from a neurological standpoint, let's just introduce some concepts that you would see that can trip depression.
Sure. So I think a lot of it is, we try to make this distinction between like what is neurological, what is not neurological. And you can't really affect one without affecting the other, right? Mm-hmm. We've tried to compartmentalize these systems, but it doesn't really work that way because you're trying to, they influence each other. They're connected. So I'll use my case as an example. When I went through depression, I was making really, really poor diet decisions. I was eating tons of junk food. I was in college. You're eating, the chips, the pizza, the beer, whatever it was. So I wasn't getting those healthy, full, nutrient-dense foods like fruits, vegetables, and healthy meats and fats. So that was actually playing into blood sugar levels. So the blood sugar levels were starting to change the production of my serotonin because blood sugar swings can actually change the rate that serotonin's made in your gut and stuff like that. Another aspect that I wasn't exercising. So my sleep pattern, my cortisol and my melatonin levels were all shifted all over the place. So I wasn't actually getting restful sleep when I was sleeping. I was waking up at weird periods throughout the night. And then the other part is like the stress, the cortisol response, all that stuff. Not only was it affecting my blood sugar, but it was also affecting my ability to like really function at a high level like I was used to. So as far as like what happens neurologically, there's several neurotransmitters that are made in your brain. We can go a little bit, I guess, into those, which is like dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, GABA. You guys can go Google all those if you're interested, if you want more information about those. But all of these different types of neurotransmitters have specific jobs as far as what they do. And so if you're suffering from some form of depression, that would be a way that you could depression or anxiety, you could kind of determine what you think the neurotransmitter is that might, be affected.
Mm-hmm. So one thing about, depression as a blanket statement, it's usually a symptom of something else going on in the body. And it could be whatever's creating a digestive problem, whether it's a social, emotional issue, and then compromising a little bit of neurotransmitter production. Because as we discussed earlier, you were talking about a lot of these neurotransmitters being manufactured not only in the gut, but some also in the brain. And these neurotransmitters are the drill sergeants of how your brain's going to work and how your mind's going to work. So these neurochemicals, if you will, if they are imbalanced, well, your brain can't work properly. So a lot of these lifestyle pieces will drastically affect your gut health and your brain health. And naturally, your gut and your brain aren't going to be able to function due to neurotransmitter imbalances. So depression and anxiety, there is no lab test. There's no objective data for these. Would you agree with that, Dr. Kolby?
Yeah, there's not really a blood test that you can use to measure neurotransmitters. And if they tell you that they're measuring neurotransmitters, they're measuring peripheral neurotransmitters that are manufactured outside the central nervous system, which can still be valuable, but theoretically neurotransmitters that are made outside the central nervous system should not actually be able to get into the brain. So it's not necessarily a super reliable marker about the status of neurotransmitters in the central nervous system. because you have a barrier that actually wraps around your brain called the blood-brain barrier that prevents, objects from getting into your brain that shouldn't be in there.
So the production of neurotransmitters on the other side, outside the brain and outside of the blood-brain barrier versus inside. But what I was saying is, if we have a diagnosis of anxiety or depression, there is no lab test on that. They might see neurotransmitter imbalances, but it doesn't confirm. It's more of an assessment. It's an evaluation.
Exactly. It's all based off like symptoms.
So it's a symptom-driven diagnosis. It's not objective. It's subjective. No, don't want to say by anybody listening to this that's inaccurate, but it still is subjective due to the examiner. So take that into consideration and don't underestimate the power of specific lifestyle pieces. If we are getting depressed or we are having a bad day, that naturally changes our behavior and pulls us away from healthier behaviors, because we're looking for instant gratification in our actions that with long-term consequences, we naturally spiral and move out of control. Depression and anxiety doesn't happen overnight. It's usually a spiral, a transition. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I actually have a great example of this. So I have a patient that is 70. And this will play perfectly into like the whole diet and lifestyle part that you're just talking about, and how really habits can affect like how we are mentally and emotionally and all this stuff. So this patient came into me, 70 years old, has suffered from depression and anxiety for like 35, 40 years. Social anxiety, where he couldn't go into public places. They used to love going to him and his significant other used to really love going to concerts and stuff like that. And he was unable to do that anymore. He came to me, he found me through the internet. I need your help. I've had this severe debilitating anxiety and depression for 35 years. What's going on? So I ran some labs on him, and the guy comes back as iron deficient. Okay, so you need iron to produce a lot of these neurotransmitters that we're already talking about. On top of that, we looked at his blood sugar levels. His blood sugar was all over the place. We ran some salivary hormone panels. His hormones were all out of whack. The first question I asked is, why is this individual anemic? You shouldn't have, a 70-year-old male that's anemic, because he's not a female going through menses or anything like that. So we did some further investigation, and through a history and all this kind of stuff, I figured out that he was for the last 40 years, a recreational marijuana user. Well, overuse of marijuana can actually affect the level of iron in your blood, and he became anemic as a result. So through the use of hey, we're going to stop smoking the marijuana, we're going to implement some healthy eating habits, and then on top of that, we actually gave him exercise as part of his management and his regimen, where we would have him exercise first thing in the morning, really intensely for about 5 to 10 minutes within 3 to 5 minutes of waking up. And within 6 months of him coming in, we actually dropped his anxiety levels by almost 90%. So actually last July, he went to a blues festival for a week, where he camped out amongst all these other campers and attendants at this concert. And he came back, he's like, this is the best I felt. I rode my bike with my wife. We went out to eat. It was awesome. And it was all some small lifestyle changes that we made with him, and we implemented over 6 months, so that he could actually, we gave him the power to take his health back, to where he actually implemented everything, and he had control of the symptoms that he was suffering. And it's amazing to see the person he is now versus where he was, a year ago.
Wow. That's amazing, because I see cases like that too. And when someone's life is on a spiral and a tumble, we both experienced that personally, and they can tumble completely out of control, or the brakes can be hit and there can be a new direction in that life. And then when people get out of that, like this gentleman, and he looks back at life of where he was, usually it causes a lot of tears, because he can't believe that he was on that path of self-destruction and darkness. There was a lady that I was working with. I'll talk about the lady. Every morning when she came into the office, because she had severe anxiety, And that was her thing. But, once we did a bunch of lab work, we were able to find there was a whole lot more going on. There was significant digestive disorders, food irritation. There was some fungal infections in her digestive tract. There was blood sugar problems, like you talked about, how blood sugar plays directly into serotonin and dopamine. And in the morning was her highest level of anxiety for whatever reason. And it wouldn't just be anxiety and stress, and she'd be on edge and flustered with everything and wasn't able to accomplish much throughout her day. And then it caused problems with her and her husband with the relationship. But she would break out in these hives, usually in the morning. It would be about, 5 out of 7 days out of the week. She'd break out in these hives. And there was no connection in the conventional medical model that hives were associated with anxiety. The hives, they said she was either reacting to something, or they were trying to give her some kind of medication as a form of a steroid to try to cover them up. But once we made, and you talked about this, these little, over the course of months, these little changes, these little steps, never happened overnight with your patient or any of mine. Once you implement these little steps, people feel a little bit better. They can take on something more, feel a little bit better, take on something more. And after this lady, her blood chemistry was all balanced. She had a super amount of energy in the morning. The hives were gone, zero anxiety in the morning, and she was able to start enjoying her marriage much more. So,
which in turn not only affected her life, but also her partner's life. You think
always
about the amount of stress that was on her partner.
Of course. Our health, our health never, ever just affects us. It influences everyone around us. And when I speak about this, I tell people that, everybody, regardless of what you think, there are people that love you and care for you and will do anything for you. And if your health plummets, you are going to affect everyone around you because they're going to try to do everything for you. It's going to affect them. So if we take care of ourselves, we actually indirectly take care of everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to this whole anxiety and depression piece, we got into the weeds a little bit, but when we talk about management strategies, Dr. Kolby, what do you see, and don't go too far in the weeds on this one, what do you see as the pharmaceutical approach to it? This is extremely high on the pharmaceutical intervention, anxiety and depression. Like you talked about anxiety alone in the US, there's 40 million Americans in the United States, age 18 and older, being diagnosed with anxiety. And 8%, I don't know what that number is, are diagnosed with depression. So this is a major pharmaceutical driver. Within the pharmaceutical model, what are the most common drugs?
Yeah, so a lot of my patients that come in with anxiety, depression are taking things like SSRIs, citalopram, Celexa. They're taking MAOIs. In some cases, they take benzodiazepines, non-agonist GABA receptor drugs. There's a lot of them that they can take. It's hard because there's no objective data that they can measure, so they really don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot, and it's based on symptoms. So it's like, all right, we'll put you on this, and hopefully it makes you feel better. I think that one thing that's important to realize is like medications are awesome. I was on medications, helped me get through like one of the darkest times of my life for sure. But they're not a long-term solution, I guess. So I guess I got lucky in my case because, after like 6 or 8 weeks, I was like, all right, this is not a long-term. I can't continue to take this for the rest of my life. I'm 22, I'm 21, 22 years old. I can't take these medications for the rest of my life. And I got lucky in the fact that I, again, was surrounded by the right information, the right people at the right time. A lot of people aren't, but again, it's not a long-term intervention, or it shouldn't be. That's when you need to start looking for alternatives as far as like health, lifestyle, diet, exercise, even if you counseling in some cases to help deal with some of the stress and trauma, if you have that. All those are really valid options as far as like additions to pharmaceutical treatment of these.
For sure. And I think one thing that, you and I both do similar models. You focus a lot on neurology, I focus a lot on metabolism and metabolic disorders. But when their mind falls offline, meaning if their mind isn't in the right place, their mindset has left them. Again, this anxiety and depression disorders, everything else follows. People aren't motivated to do what they need to do to maintain their life, their family, their health, their finances. There's a reason why the homeless population, the majority of them have emotional and neurological, psychological conditions, is because the mind is what determines, is what guides us through life and success and enjoyment. So this whole mental health issue, it is a massive thing. And there's been more mental health problems now than there ever has. And from what I see, most of these mental health disorders are the result of absolute terrible environmental and lifestyle and diet, the effects of all of these things.
All of them, not just one, right? So we like to point the finger and go, this is the one incident. In my opinion, in my experience, it's never just one thing. So in my case, perfect example, mental stress because of, the divorce between my parents, the mental stress of dealing with, the loss of my grandfather and my significant other. And then on top of that, with like the emotional stress of losing like that security of what you perceive as your future. And then on top of that, you throw in all the other types of stress that I had put on myself maybe, but were still present, as far as like eating a terrible diet, keeping really bad sleep habits, staying up late, studying, getting up early, going to class type of deal. All of these, concomitants all came together at the right time and caused the anxiety and the depression. So it's really important to try to maybe weed out all of them individually and then put together a plan where maybe you can help get some management for all of them. So in my case, changed my diet, went to got help with managing my stress levels, changed my sleeping patterns, developed more healthy habits. All these things can be a part, maybe not the whole thing, but if you look at the big picture and you start breaking it down and you start implementing these small changes like we did with my 70-year-old patient, then it becomes more sustainable, right? It's not going to happen overnight.
That's right.
You didn't get depression overnight. It's not like one day you woke up and boom, I'm depressed. There's been a bunch of different factors that have all played into this. So it's going to take you a while to get out of it.
So yeah, it's definitely been a series of events that built up a changed state of mind. And then that changed state of mind puts you on a path of degeneration or of disorder, of dysfunction. You talked about some of the pharmaceutical efforts with regards to these conditions, and there is a place for them. I see my clients, they'll be dealing with something really severe. The medication helps lift them out of that mindset. But the long-term game, these rates of anxiety and depression, it's not a pharmaceutical deficiency. It's not an SSRI deficiency that these things are going on. It's not a medication deficiency. So as you talked about, they can be very powerful for the short term to get people lifted. So that can give them the opportunity, hopefully the motivation, to start looking at themselves and what they can do for themselves, the lifestyle pieces. And when it comes to, the other strategies, the natural strategies, the lifestyle strategies, the long-term game, I know you and I, Dr. Kolby, we could go into the weeds on this one. I know diet's a factor. We need blood flow. We need enkephalins and endorphins from activity. But, we really need a guide in this, I think, right? We really need a guide to help us walk through these pieces and give us the tools and the direction so people can actually make those changes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, like you said, I think the pharmaceuticals are incredibly useful in the right circumstances. I don't think that they're a good long-term solution because, like you said, you didn't wake up one day and all of a sudden go, you know what? I think my body quit making a drug that degrades the breakdown of serotonin. Exploring those other options is definitely huge. And that's the importance of having not only someone who knows what they're doing, but also having a good team in place and having a good support structure around you, not only like with your mental or with your health providers, but also like in your family setting or your friends and all this. It's really important to kind of wade through all of these different aspects of your life and your health that can influence this stuff. So, I mean, if I'm more than happy to be a advocate, or I guess to help with anyone who might be suffering from this type of stuff. Like I said, I myself have suffered from this, so it's pretty important to me. If you'd like to reach out to me or Dr. Glenn at any time, please do so. We'd be more than happy to work with you remotely or get you in touch with someone who can help you in your area if we know anybody. My website is www.northlakeschiropractic.com. You can reach out to us on Facebook. Our Facebook is North Lakes Chiropractic and Functional Neurology. Dr. Glenn, go ahead, drop your contact info.
Yeah. Probably the website would be the best. All our contact info is there, and there's a lot of information. That's www.drgharrison.com, or just Google the Center of Functional Medicine, and we're in Denver, Colorado. And Dr. Kolby, you are in?
I'm in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, so almost Canada.
Yeah, we're across the country. But yeah, we can work with anybody remotely as well, and provide the tools or guidance or find some direction in the area that you're in. You don't have to live this way. You can get past it, and it's a big, beautiful, amazing world out there, and you can engage in it. I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we don't really have a topic for the next time. I guess we'll have to brainstorm, no pun intended, or another idea. As always, if you guys have a topic or something that you'd like us to cover, maybe leave a comment below or get a hold of us. If you found this content valuable, please share it with others that you love or someone that you know that might be suffering from anxiety and depression, so that they may use it for a resource to get the help that they need. If you like this one, we do have other podcasts and webinar video casts kind of available. Go ahead and take a look at those and stay tuned, because we'll have more content rolling out here shortly.
We will. Thank you, Dr. Kolby.
Until next time, my man, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.